Hello folks, just doing the standard sound check at 6:34 on my clock. Hopefully you can hear me and you can see me. If you can, the regulars will know the procedure. If someone can just pop a yes, it's all working in the chat, and I'll know we're good to go in 6 minutes and 18 seconds. Hello everyone, welcome to In Studio Live, the 95th edition. We are getting dangerously close to that 100th edition. Now, welcome everyone. Just want to say at this point, I hope you all realise the great cost this show is tonight. It means I can't watch Doctor Who live. Some of you may even have already seen it, and I haven't. So it's a real hardship for me. It genuinely is. I was trying to work out if there's any way I could watch it here at the studio before going live, and I couldn't find a way to do it. So unfortunately, I've not seen Doctor Who. So spoiler-free zone, please. Spoiler-free zone. Right, okay, let's get a move on with tonight's show. I've done the same as I did last week. I've got the that slightly different setting for latency set. So hopefully the time lag between me and you is less. But I seem to have a few problems at my end last week, although nobody else seemed to see them with buffering. So if things do buffer, please let me know as we go through. Right, okay, so what have we got on the show tonight? Well, our theme tonight is the importance of failure. And actually, strange as it sounds, this is a very it's something that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and it's a topic that I think is very, very important that we actually do look at and understand and put it into a proper context on there. I've broken it down into 3 failure topics, and I'm scattering them throughout the show. There's actually a fourth one. There's a fourth one right at the end, which is related to it. So it's 3 on the importance of failure, and a fourth one which is related to that, as I'll explain shortly on there. We've got our usual image feedback, both from emailed images and from the Facebook group on there. And of course, not quite at the end, because my final part 4 of the talk will be turning up after I've said what the image of the week's going to be. So not quite at the end, but towards the end will be the image of the week. So stay tuned to find out if it's yours. Right, it is an interactive show. So please, if you can get the YouTube live chat up, on there, you can ask me questions as we're going through. You can comment on what I'm doing, all those sorts of things, and hopefully that means I'm not just talking to an empty room. Right, so I'm going to kick off, dive straight into our topic for the night. That'll upset anyone who's arriving late, because they'll have missed the all-important introduction, and serve them right for being late. Right, no, seriously, importance of failure. I want to talk about in the first section why it's actually important to fail. And I genuinely believe that it is important to have failure in the things that you do. I'll explain why and the context to it. I know it sounds odd. Then the second section, which will be a little bit later in the show, I'm going to talk about ways in which to make space to fail. If it is important, we need to make sure that we have that opportunity to fail. And you'll see what I mean with that as we get to it. So some practical advice on how to do that, and do it in a way that's not going to be a disaster, so that you get the benefits of it. The third section is going to be dealing with what I call unplanned failure, as opposed to what the second section is about allowing ourselves to fail in a controlled way. And again, you'll understand as we go through on that. And then the final thing, which isn't about the importance of failure, but it's connected to it, so I wanted to include it, is I think I've called under the general heading of false failure, about failure that isn't really failure. And I just want to look at that and make a few observations. Let's get on with this. Why is it important for us to fail? Oh, excuse me, folks. Oh, excuse me. I'm allergic to failure. No, it's important to fail because we all want to improve our photography. We all want to get better, right? None of us want to get worse, and I hope none of us want to stay at the level we're at the moment. We want to improve with our photography. And if you never fail in your photography, if you never have something go wrong, what it actually means is you're not pushing your boundaries. You're not pushing your own limits. And if you never push your limits, you're never really going to improve on things. And that's the basis of most training. It's important to just push yourself and keep pushing yourself to be able to improve. And that form of pushing needs to be controlled. Therefore, there's a sense of there being a controlled failure to what we do. Again, it'll become a bit more obvious as I carry on. But the bottom line is, if you push your limits, at some point, you're going to fail. You're not going to get it right because you've pushed yourself at that point further than you can actually achieve. Things are going to go wrong, or you're not going to get the desired results with it. So, basically, if you never fail, you're only working in your own existing comfort zone, your own level of ability. You're never, ever going to grow if you never push yourself. So that's effectively what this is about. It's not about failing per se, it's about growing as a photographer. It follows on naturally to what we were looking at last week on there. But really, just failing by itself and getting something wrong isn't sufficient to lead to growth. We can all get something wrong over and over again and never improve. But it's how we respond to failure, which is the thing which enables us to improve as photographers and to grow as human beings as well on that. So just failing isn't enough. We need some additional bits to go with it. And that's what I call, first of all, the debrief. And now, debrief, normally you think of the meeting where you all talk through what went wrong. A debrief like that can be just you by yourself taking the time out to analyse why you failed. And that is a crucial part of failing. Failing per se doesn't help anyone. It's what you do with that failure that will help you to improve. So you need that time to analyse what went wrong, what failed, why didn't this work as I'd intended or hoped. And that's all about discovering the lessons from the failure. And that's actually our aim. Our aim isn't actually to fail. Our aim is to discover the lessons from the failure, and if it was unintentional, as all failures tend to be, how to prevent it from happening again. In other words, how can I grow? How can I develop as a photographer from this failure? And it's absolutely critical to work out why something has failed, why something didn't work out on there. And the way we do that is we take this step back and we just start to think about, well, what went on there? What happened? And it's all about being objective. That's what I mean by take a step back. Just be objective about something and think it through and look at it. And I would say do it not in the heat of the moment when something went wrong or when something failed, maybe a few hours later or even a few days later, and go and think, okay, well, why didn't this work as I wanted it to? And start to think, well, was it because the subject I was trying to photograph was over complex? Was it because I didn't really understand the technique that I was trying to use? Was it because I wasn't prepared properly? And once you know why it happened, you can then start to think about, well, how can I make sure I succeed next time? That's the learning process. That's why it's important to fail, because it's this question, it's learning how to succeed next time that generates the growth for us as photographers. Now, the reason may be obvious to you. I'll give you one of my failures as an example. Many years ago, I went to photograph a wedding, and I arrived and found that, well, it was in the days I had a battery grip on the camera, and I found out that the two batteries I'd put into my battery grip were both completely dead. And it didn't take me long to realise why that had happened. Why it had happened was because before I set off on a long journey up to the Lake District, I did a sensor clean on the camera, and I'd forgot to turn the camera off at the end, and that kept the mirror up, and the shutter open, and it drained the power on the two batteries. By the time I got all the way up to the lakes, both the batteries were completely dead in there. So that's the why. But I then learned a very important lesson from it, which helped me make sure I didn't make that mistake next time, which was do all the camera setup beforehand and make sure you've got some spare batteries, which I did actually on that day. So I had with me a duplicate set of batteries, so I was able to put those in. And because I was also a guest at the wedding, I was able to plug in the charger, which I also had with me, and charge up the others at that point. So I learned an important lesson on that. Not least of all, double check. So things like if I'm going to clean the camera, I clean the camera beforehand, and then separately I do the checks. Are the batteries in there? Is everything fully charged? So that's the analysis and the lessons learned from that failure. So that's the step on it. Debrief, why, and how do I prevent it from happening again? But you may, particularly with images, you may get to a point where I know this doesn't work, but I don't know why it doesn't work. And that's why it's important to get feedback on your photography. That's why every time I do this show, I have a feedback section in there, because feedback on your images is vitally important. That's how we learn. We learn from the things which didn't quite work right, and we have that step of trying to find out why it didn't work and what we can do about it. So if you want feedback and you want really good feedback on something, and you know you've got an image that doesn't work, put it up on a forum such as the In Studio Facebook group, and just ask one question underneath. Very simply, why didn't this work? Or what should I have done differently? And that will elicit a response from people, and you'll get valuable feedback that way, which will help you improve as a photographer. And just make sure you get real feedback. And by asking those questions explicitly, you'll get feedback that isn't just collecting a series of likes. Let's be honest, likes don't mean anything. Or people just say, oh, great shot. What does that mean in reality? A great shot because you captured the expression on here, that's useful. But great shot by itself doesn't actually tell you anything. Had a discussion with a photographer this week who was a little bit concerned about not getting many likes on Purple Port, and the upshot of it, I was able to say to the photographer, actually, just if you want more likes on Purple Port, it's very, very easy to get them, and that's just post images with models with fewer clothes on. Simple as that. That's where you'll get the likes. In other words, the likes are actually meaningless. They don't mean anything. Yes, it might make your ego feel a little better, but they absolutely do not mean anything. What means something is positive, is sensible feedback, saying this works because, this didn't work because, why don't you try this? That's what you need to be looking for. And it's very easy to actually get it by just asking the question, can somebody tell me why this didn't work? Or I'm not happy with this image. Can you tell me why? Or even another one, even if you're not sure, you think, is it a good image or isn't it a good image? Ask a question like, how can I make this image better? It doesn't necessarily mean it's a poor image, it's you saying, how can I improve? And asking those questions when you post an image will give you better feedback. Maybe it's a technique that went wrong. You've done your analysis and you realize, actually, I don't know how to light this scene properly. Or I don't know how to change the settings on my camera to make this work. Those are the times where you think, okay, this is a knowledge gap problem. And at that point, get input from somebody else, another photographer. Ask them to show you. If you're friends with people who are regularly on this live stream, just ping them a message saying, can you tell me about such and such? You use that technique. Or ask the question in my Facebook group. Again, that's why it's there, so you can ask these sorts of questions. Maybe you've struggled with lighting a scene and you want some advice. Then just put a question in there and approach it that way. Or you could get some training. Hey, that's what I'm here for. And let me be brutally honest with you. I don't just do these live streams just for the sake of it. Yes, I want people to do it, and I do enjoy doing them. But part of it is because I want to raise my profile as a trainer, and I want to improve as a trainer. And the best way I can improve as a trainer, particularly in video stuff, is do more of it. Thus, I'm doing these on a regular basis. And yeah, it really does help me. But I'm here as a trainer. So if you're stuck on something, I can give you, you can come to some of my group events. I need to get some more on the calendar. Or I can offer one-to-one training to help people like that. So consider that if it's a particular area. And I know there are some of you who are on this live stream tonight. There's at least 2 photographers who have had specific training off me. Actually, more than that, looking at the list, who've either been along to events or had training or one-to-one training. And it's a great way to improve. You get that focused time to really drill down into what it is you want to learn. And of course, slightly tongue-in-cheek, considering I'm talking to you through YouTube, if everything else fails, you could always try YouTube. And actually, for a lot of things, you can try YouTube and just my channel will tell you, because I've got a lot of stuff up there. But there are lots of other great educators on YouTube. Have a look round. Yes, there's a lot of dross up there too. Yes, you have to be discerning about what you follow on there. But you can get some really great feedback and help that way if it's a particular technique that you're struggling with. And the final thing to say, I think this is the final slide in this section, is don't be too harsh on yourself. We all fail. We all make mistakes, and we all have things go wrong. I often say to people, the only difference between a professional, such as myself, and an amateur is you never get to see the professional's mistakes. That's not entirely true in my case, is it? But you know what I mean. I will show some of my mistakes as because I consider myself as an educator, and I think that's important. But for most professionals, we don't put our mistakes on our portfolios on there, so you just don't get to see them. We're very selective. When you look at your own images, you see all the things which went wrong. When I look at my images, I see the things which I got wrong. I can look at professional shoots I've done for clients and I'll go, oh no, I got that completely wrong. But there were, it's a longer story, but maybe I'll do it as another topic, really about protecting yourself when you've got an important shoot and the things that you need to do. I mean, I'm going off script here, about the things I do, effectively my photographer's insurance plan, not talking about insurance as such, but the things I do to protect myself. If I've got an important shoot, what I actually do to make sure I protect myself against failure, I suppose. So maybe in a few weeks' time I'll talk about that, the photographer's insurance plan. But just remember, failure is not a negative thing. It's a learning opportunity on there. That's okay, that's a bit of spin on it, but it's true. And there's an old saying I often say, if we learn from our mistakes, then I must be getting a fantastic education. Yeah, we use our mistakes as learning. And if we do that, it's not a negative thing. Don't beat yourself up about it. We all make mistakes. We all have failures on there. We just look at it and say, okay, it happened, move on. Because you can't change what's happened on there. So that's my effectively introduction to this. Big introduction. It's probably the largest of the sections, actually. But that's why it's important to fail. It's important to fail because those are the times when you really learn, because you tried something and it didn't happen and you just needed you needed more time to master that skill. Okay, let's have a look what's going on in chat, because there's at least one message in there. From Gary saying, what do you think what do you do when you think you've got a great image but others disagree? Do you plough your own furrow or alter your approach to comply with the feedback? Ooh, that's a really good question. I think if it's just one person saying, no, that doesn't work, and they can back that up, if it's just one person saying that, you'll think about it and go, okay, maybe they don't like what I've done. You're never going to please everyone. I know there are things about my photography that some people don't like. It doesn't stop me doing them. There are some people who absolutely hate my quirky angles on them and think a camera should always be perfectly upright or horizontal. What I would say is, if you find more than one person or a sizable number of people are saying, hang on, that's not a good image, and these are the things which are wrong with it, and this is what you should do about it, and there tends to be a consensus, then I would take that a lot more seriously than if I just got one person who said, oh, that's a rubbish image, Ian, without backing it up, or even if they could back it up. With that, there is a certain thing that you do need to be aware of, and that is all about having your own style. And your style is what makes your photography yours. There are certain photographers I know instantly when I look at one of their images that it's one of their images. And I've done blog posts on this in the past. A local architectural photographer, Andy Marshall, take one look at an image that he's produced and I know it's an Andy Marshall image, just the way he does it. I can't necessarily put my finger on it. So he's got his own style. Rick Bradbury has his own style. He's actually moved a little bit away from what was his signature style of the very deep shadows. He's actually learned how to use a fill light recently. I was quite shocked. I saw him using a fill light the other month. I thought, what have you done with Rick? Who is this strange person in front of me? No, seriously, he has his own style. I have my own style, and my style is a slightly more saturated, a slightly more contrasty look than a number of photographers. So it's important to have that, and how you weigh up that feedback is based on who it's coming from. Now, if somebody, let's say, trying to think of a photographer. Okay, it would never happen. But if I was doing black and white photography, and Ansel Adams told me that an image which I thought was great was a load of rubbish, and he gave me some advice on how to do it, I would pay great attention to that because it was Ansel Adams. If somebody who doesn't particularly do landscape photography, I'm going to use Rick as another example here. If Rick came up to me and said, oh, that's not a very good landscape photo, I probably wouldn't give it quite as much weight because Rick doesn't do landscape photography, and he's the first person to say that, it's not his niche. So I wouldn't give it quite as much weight. So there's lots of factors involved in how you respond to that feedback. And that's just thoughts off the top of my head. It's not a very structured response, I'm afraid, Gary, but I don't know. I hope that's sort of answered your question, sort of, with it. So talking of feedback, excuse me a moment. And talking of feedback, let's flip over into Lightroom, and I'm going to go through the feedback on the images which were emailed to me. And as I say every week, if you want priority on feedback, email the images to feedback@ians-studio.co.uk. Those come up first in the live stream, and I can give better and longer feedback on them than I do with the ones I take from Facebook. So I encourage you to do that. So let's head over into Lightroom. And I'm going to start off with 3 images from Gary, Gary Platt. So let's just have a look at these, and let's have a look at the EXIF on this. Right, so obviously an indoor shot. I like the abstract nature of this. I like the colours. Red, white and blue always works well in an image. I notice you've used a little bit of exposure compensation, which is the right thing to do. Why? Because there's a lot of white in here, so it would need that just to effectively get the whites towards the white end of the histogram on it. I like the quirky angle. I think the quirky angle could be a little bit more quirky with it potentially. Now I've done it by tilting the image a little bit on there. So I think that would work a little bit better with that quirkiness. Obviously larger than you've got on there with it, because I've cropped out a lot of the things. I'm just going to reset it, because the other thing just to watch was this bit up here, which meant if you were doing a quirky angle, you could have lost that section there, that one, and just got a bit more down at the bottom here on the image. So a little bit more quirkiness to it. The other way you could have got the quirky angle, I think, is not so much tilting the camera, but photographing it from more of an oblique angle on there. Could have worked with that. But good image on there. Nice sort of abstract, well seen, and works well without people in there. But one of the things which I think would be nice with it, and I know this wasn't in your control, but I have actually done something similar, and I just got one person sitting in an empty room with all the chairs, but in the middle, and say in this image it would be this seat here would be the one. Well, let me reset that crop. Yeah, that would be the seat to do it. Just have somebody sitting there as a focal point. And quite often with these repetition shots, having a single focal point also helps with it. It's one particular area to draw the eye. Another one by Gary. This lovely sunset. I like the layers with this. f2.8. Focal length 78. So it's quite a wide angle one on there. The only thing I would change with it is, and this is an odd one, but it just feels as though it needs a little bit more black at the top from the overhanging trees. Rule of thumb with things like that, I find that the balance works. So you see here we've got this much green at the bottom. I'd like to see a similar amount of black starting from about here. So I would say if you took the black up to, I hope you can see where my cursor is, about there, I think that would be about the right position for it, just that fraction more. Again, one of the reasons being that if you were to then print this, the bleed on it, on the print, would be coming down to about that much. I'll just do top and bottom, but the same would apply on the sides as well. They would come in just that much would be your bleed on the print. And you see the black now is just, it's just not quite enough. So it would help to have that. But just to show you how the balance works, just doing that, can you see that even with that amount of black, that's actually helped by having slightly less of the green in there. So that sort of thing helps with it. But well spotted, and that layered effect with it really works nicely on this. I wonder whether you could have effectively moved the black down just slightly, because our layers on here are really of similar sort of bands, except for this sort of really wide band there. And if you'd taken a few steps back, Gary, that would have appeared to be lower in the scene, and perhaps that bit would then just come down to about here on the scene. And I wonder whether that might have worked as an option. Not sure, but I'd be just tempted to try and almost lower the black with it by just moving back very slightly, and that would give you that extra little bit of black I was talking about in the image on there. Right, this is Wells Cathedral and the steps up to the chapter house. Nice black and white conversion. Let's have a look at the settings on here. 1/3 of a second, yeah, I know what it's like in there, it's quite dark. And right, you must have been an auto ISO to end up with an ISO of 142. I might go full screen on there. 7.1 millimeter. Those are sort of quite weird settings. I wonder whether you're on a tripod or not with it. I thought you must be to get something as sharp. Oh, not quite as sharp as I thought it was going to be with that. Is this a mobile phone shot? I wonder with it. Yeah, there's a little bit of blur with it. Now, like the angle, like the way you've got the two different stairs going off, I've actually also photographed this a few years back, and that's my version of it. Very similar actually, it's just I'm a little bit further over on the right. Now, again, mine's perhaps not quite as sharp as it could be, but the lens I was using wasn't my sharpest lens by a long way on that, and shooting at f/19 did not help one little bit with it. So I managed the 30th of a second on mine at f/19, but that was my composition. Again, we've gone very similar on the post-processing. I've just added this cream tone to it, which is a slight sepia hint on there on that. So just throw that out as an alternative for you on that one. Okay, so now let me move on to a couple of images by Bernard Robinson, and I'm just going to develop with these. Now these images Bernard shot at the studio during the week on a mentored shoot. The model is Kat, and these were they're both from the first set that we did on there. So a couple of things about this. The main thing I'm going to say about this, Bernard, is it needs a little bit more of the blind in there. We'd set this up with Kat looking out of a blind. We've got just a hint of it in here, but it's a sort of question, well, what's she looking at? So it just needs that little bit more context in there. Now, I don't know whether I can achieve this on the JPEG, whether there is detail in the blacks that I can bring in. There, yeah, we haven't got all of the detail in there on that. So I've brought a little bit of that shadow detail into it. I'm also just going to do a very slight rotate with it, because that's now she's looking straight on there. But yeah, nice shot with it. I just think it needs a little bit more context. We've got a hint of the blind in there, but I think it just needs perhaps just a fraction more on that. Oh, I think I've rotated it too far. My apologies. With it. That's odd. It's just, no, it doesn't want to go straight, that one. I think one of the chords mustn't have been straight anyway. So maybe you were right with it, Bernard. But nice shot on there. Everything appears to be within. One thing to think about with the raw processing, you might just want to bring the highlights down very slightly. That'll work better on a raw file than it did on here. So now I just do something like that. Those little areas which were just starting to blow out, that just brings them back in. So that was the original, and that's my sort of change on there. Now maybe I've gone a little bit too far with that. I'm just going to bring it back down again. So just something like that. Again, it's down to personal preference, how much light you want in the darker areas. I quite like a little bit in there, but maybe, yeah, bring it. Oh no, it's highlight slider. No wonder I'm having trouble. I'm on the wrong one. Maybe not bring that quite as far as I had. Ooh. And it's just a little tweak to it all, something like that. How's that? That was, I think I prefer yours now. Finished playing with it. Yeah, just that little bit of context then is the only thing. Right, the other one. Now you can see the blind there. And this works very, very well with it. I just wonder whether a black and white conversion would work. I'm actually going to use my black and white 3 on there. And I think that, again, let's make sure everything's vertical on it. I think that works really well on there. It's very sort of film noir type look with it on there, but it's a lovely shot. And now we've got the context of the blind with it. And it works either way with either the colour or the black and white on there. With it, just enough detail in the shadows here to make it work on there. So lovely shots to be proud of with those. And again, just a very, very slight bring down of the highlights. It's not much, it's just to try and equalize the whole thing. And oh, that's too much when I've done with the black and white conversion, that's too much that I've done. But something like that gives you a very film noir look as well. Just alternative processing to think about with that. Right, Paul, couple of images here. Quirky angle on this. This is one I wonder. Let's see what I've got in terms of. Yeah, I haven't got any EXIF information on it, unfortunately. Nice and sharp on the cobwebs on there. I wonder what the depth of field is like on that, because we're beginning to lose those all-important edges. And this is always a problem to know where to focus on something like this. So you really do want quite a good depth of field with it. And I'm way behind on time. I'm going to have to get a move on with this. But I think in Develop, this just needs, you see, we've got a lot of space at the top end of that histogram. We can just afford to lighten this up a little bit. I think a square crop would look good with it. Something like that. And maybe even like that along there. That sort of thing I would do, I would consider with it. Like that. But generally, not a bad shot. I think it needs a slightly tighter, slightly bigger depth of field with it on there. Like this, love the light coming out from behind the clouds on there. I think, again, we can just afford to bring the exposure up a fraction and contrast up just a fraction with it to create that. But lovely shot. I'd like to see a little bit more foreground interest. Watch these trees coming in on that side. So let's lose there. Maybe just tighten it up a little bit at the top. Maybe even down to something like that. It'd have been nice to have somebody standing here to create a silhouette on there. But nice shot. Just needs a little bit more foreground interest, ideally a silhouette on it. Now, I know sometimes that's not possible, but capturing an image like that is good. If you get into compositing, then that's a useful sky to have available to you on there. So I think that's it on that. So let's go back and yeah, I'm just going to have a look what's going on. No, we've got nothing new in the chat. So let me carry on with this. Our next part on our theme tonight, all about failure. In the first section earlier on, I looked at why it's important to fail. In other words, failure is the thing we learn from. So if that's a way of learning, it's important that we make space to fail. So let's look at how we can do that in a sensible way, in a way that it's not going to be, those failures aren't disasters, but learning opportunities. And let's look at how we can do that within our photography. So the first thing to do is actually just set aside time to try a new technique. So if you're wanting to learn lighting, set aside time just to have a go at maybe a new lighting technique and shoot that. Or a group shoot, attend a group shoot on a topic that you don't normally shoot. So lighting different techniques. Maybe set some time aside just to try and master HDR techniques and how to do those. Or panning or something like that. So a technique that you think, I don't know this, set aside time to try and experiment with it. And you will get things wrong, you'll get some things right. And then go through that process we talked about earlier about the debrief and learning from it. And really, when you are trying to learn something, there's this 3 phases to learning. And it's all about trying out the technique, debrief, analyze the results, learn from what went wrong, and have another go at it. So, and then just keep that going round, repeat as required. Now it might be you fail once, you learn from it, next time all works fine. And that's the process with it. And that's just about setting aside the time, learn a new technique, and be prepared to fail whilst you're learning it. And that's because it's time that's set aside for learning. You can afford to fail there without it being a disaster, because that's what the time's for. Try a different genre of photography. And this is something I actually do try to encourage a lot of people to do. I'm surprisingly unsuccessful at getting people to go out of their comfort zone. For example, if you do portraiture and that's your main thing, then maybe set aside some time and go out and try and learn and have a go at landscape photography. Because it gets you thinking in a different way, and what you will learn from that, you'll be able to apply some of those techniques to your portraiture, your location portraiture, because you're thinking about, this is the scene, how would I do this if I had a subject there? So it pushes those muscles, the creative muscles, by trying something that's slightly out of your area. And it's amazing how many things that you learn in one genre of photography, even if it's not your main genre, are really useful for other genres of photography. Portraiture is really useful for travel photography, to be able to get people in your shots. Architectural photography is useful for travel, or travel helps you to see buildings in a different way because you are photographing them to show the location rather than just picking out individual details on there. Maybe you are a strobist and you work mainly with speed lights and on location and things like that. Then try and spend some time in the studio with studio lights where you haven't got ambient light, and you're just concentrating on what the light sources that you control will add to the scene without having to worry about balancing it with the ambient light. So you're setting aside that time by trying something different, something that's outside your comfort zone. Maybe you've never shot, you've done travel photography, you've done landscapes, you've done architecture, and now you want to have a go at photographing people. So book a studio, book a mentor, and learn some of those sort of techniques. Another way to make space to fail is to make sure you get banker shots first. What do I mean by this? Well, this is something I do when I'm doing travel photography. And I arrive at a location, and one of the first things I do is, if I've already looked up the location in the guidebooks and seen the postcards and all that sort of thing, I will know what the common, quote, postcard images are for a location. And I will get those first. They're my banker shots. I've got those shots in the bank. I can then use the remaining time to work the scene, to experiment, try out new things, do things which that maybe might fail, and probably will. Some of them probably will fail. But because I've got the banker shots already, it means even if every single shot I've experimented with after that goes horribly wrong, I've still got shots of that location that I can use. If you want more information on this idea of working the scene and getting the banker shots first, have a look at live stream number 84 called Working the Scene, and I talk you through that. Then there's what I call the 90-10 rule, 90%, 10% rule. And I do this quite often when I've got a commercial job on. It's something that I actually work into my commercial work. 90% of the shoot I devote to exactly what the client has asked me to shoot. And I spend 10% trying things out. Now, it might be things that I've already done, or it might be trying things that that suddenly occur to me and think, oh, that might work. It's something which I can experiment with, which may or may not work. I've got that 10% space to do that, but I've done the 90% first. Why am I doing this on a client, effectively on my client's time? Because that 10% I'm shooting is still for the client, and it's still producing images which they might use, but it's just the things they may not have thought about. I had one client, I used to shoot a lot of billboards for them, and I got my initial brief, and I did the shots, and I used my 90-10% rule, and I did a few extra shots, which I thought were a little bit more arty than the straightforward shots, and they looked at them, and I discovered that they were using more of my arty shots in there. So next time I did a job for them, I did more of the arty shots, knowing that I've done something that they that wasn't what they initially briefed me on, but they looked at it and saw, oh, that works, we like that. So I've created and given them more than what their brief was. Basically, I'm using my creativity to help my clients. I had one client, and this wasn't billboards, this was signage, and I actually asked them for a brief. What do you actually want me to shoot? How do you want me to shoot them? And the response was, Ian, we're paying you to photograph them. We know you'll use your creativity and you'll do a good job. Just photograph them, find the best way to do it. Simple as that. So that was probably a 10-90 rule, where I did some simple, straightforward shots, but they wanted me to be creative. So I used the rest of the time just to experiment. And yeah, some of those were failures, but I made sure I had got some shots which were that I could present to them. On that. Right, that's the making time for failure. We've got coming up how to deal with unexpected failure and false failure. And I'm already running out of time, so I'm going to have to get a move on. Just to say, as ever, the live stream is sponsored by you. Thank you, folks, for everyone who's been buying me a cuppa at the link there. It's Buy Me a Coffee, basically, standard YouTuber sort of stuff, except I don't drink coffee, I drink tea. So I have my link changed to buymeatea.com /Ian Butty. And I always want to say a special thank you each week. This week, my thank you goes to Andy Wright. I'm not sure whether you're watching, Andy, but if you are, cheers. Thanks for the cuppa. I really do appreciate it when people buy me a cuppa, because let's be honest, there is a cost to doing this, particularly in terms of my time to put these together each week, and also in terms of the cost of technology to be able to do it as well. So I really appreciate those who've been buying me cuppas. Thank you very much. And even if you can't buy me a cuppa, something you can do which will help keep this going, and that's subscribe, hit the bell icon, because that's actually sending signals through to YouTube to say, hey, this is a great live stream or a great channel to follow if people are subscribing, if people are liking it, and especially the shares. If you share something using the link from YouTube, that really sends a message to YouTube. This is great stuff. So thank you to everyone who's been doing that. And it is noticeable when people do that. I get more views and things like that on the channel as a whole. So thank you for doing that. Do join the Facebook group if you haven't already, and the newsletter. Links to those down below. I won't say any more on that at this point. Right, feedback. Let's have a look at the images that I've got from the Facebook group this week. So back over into Lightroom, and let's go to the grid on there. Facebook. Right, okay. So quicker feedback on these. I'll do it in the develop module. James, don't know whether you watch these or not. Hope you do. I love the look, the colour toning that you've done on here. It's a little bit of the sepia tone gold effect on there, but I think it does work nicely on this shot. With it, like the quirky angle with it, there's enough detail in the shadows. Really works well on here. Well done. On that, there's not a great deal I would choose to change. I'd perhaps like to see a little bit more of the outfit on there with it. Maybe if you shot a little bit further down and done a square crop with it, just as a suggestion on there. Has she lost one of the horns on the helmet? Looks like she has. But yeah, nice shot, like it. Sonia, another one of your fishy shots. As ever, these are great. Really like this one. It stands out from the background on there. It's got this nice bit of foreground interest as well. Lovely shot. Great image of that. Don't know whether you actually sell your images for stock. I'm sure there'd be a market for these underwater macros that you've got, specialist photography and all that. I'm sure you must do something with them professionally, but I hope you do, because they're certainly of the right standard for that. And another great one here, this sea slug, and that is really sharp on there. I'm not sure what's gone on with the sharpening. There's just a very hint of a halo on the end there. So just be a little bit careful about getting these halos. They're easy enough to fix in Photoshop, but it's better if you don't get them to start with. I think it's possibly the sharpening, or potentially combined with the noise reduction on there. I don't know. I'd have to see an original file to be able to advise on that. But just be a little bit careful with that. But great shots, lovely composition. I do prefer the ones where the subject stands out a bit better from the background on there. Right. So next, Gary Platt uploaded a whole load of images which he'd put through a bit of software called photospiralysis. And if you look at the Facebook group, there's a link to download the software on there. I love the time spiral. I've seen this technique before, and I've seen it. It was used for a while as a Doctor Who title sequence with a clock and the top. To give the idea of time travel on there. So really like the use of that, and it works just so incredibly well with a clock like that on there. Helena, let me post this one. This is a bit different. So hearts, noughts and crosses board. My only comment on this is it's a bit of a weird noughts and crosses board because the hearts obviously have won, but the X's have carried on playing afterwards. So I would have left 2 blank squares on here just to indicate that the game was over, because the maximum number of crosses you could get if the hearts or the zeros had played 3 is 4, because that would imply, no, it'd have to be, no, it would be 3. You'd have to only have 3 crosses on there for it to be a genuine noughts and crosses game. So I'd have 3 blank squares scattered across there to make that work. Again, back with the spiralysis ones. This is a spiral, presumably of a flower going in. Quite like this, how the blur has worked its way in there. That's quite intriguing, that one. And one, I don't know what this was before you spiraled it, or what went on with it. It looks like an intentional camera movement shot that's had something done to it. And in fact, yes, it's got to be, because there's Gary's signature along the bottom of it on there. Yeah, tip for you, Gary, don't put your watermark on it before you do the process. I can see it up there as well, photography by. So I think it was an ICM, an intentional camera movement shot that Gary's put through there. I like the effect of it. Just watch the watermarks on there. Right, Bob uploaded 3 versions of an image here that he's been HDRing. Leeds Castle, I would guess, on there, which I recognise from the Doctor Who story Androids of Tara, which I think was the 4th story in season, I think it was season 16 of classic Doctor Who with Tom Baker on there, Androids of Tara. Anyway, sorry, enough of me geeking out. Nice shot. Bob wanted comment on which was best, the original HDR1 or HDR2. Now, this is an interesting problem here. I like some of the aspects of HDR3. I like we've got the detail in on the trees and certain areas. I like some of the detail in on the on the castle. I think, but I think it's a little too far on there. The comment was that number 2 is a little bit oversaturated. Maybe it is, but that's got the sort of level of detail. I'd love to see more detail in there. So what I would do with something like this is I'd take the original and the HDR and say edit in Photoshop as layers. Let's hope this comes up sensibly. It's going to take a little while to open, unfortunately, because it's only just occurred to me that I can show this one on here. Yep, right, come on, Photoshop, do your thing. There we go. I've got them in as layers. Now, what I need to do on this, I need to view. No, it's window, layers. Layers is there. Where's my layers panel? How weird. Is it on a different screen or something? Because I need to select the layers to do what I'm trying to do. And, I know where it will be. This is interesting. It's underneath another window that I need to get rid of. Right. So if I do, oh no. Right. Yeah. I've got my layers window back now. And I select both layers, edit, auto align layers, and say auto. So we've now got those aligned. Just dock that somewhere out my way. Dock it, I said, that's it. Good. So now those are aligned, I can turn the top one on and off like that with it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to crop it to get rid of the excess. And I'll go with that. Put the other layer on. I've got a little bit more to crop down at the bottom. In and down. That. So now those are aligned, I can turn it on and off with that. The advantage of that means now, which is I can change the, let me go full screen so you can see it. I can change the opacity on that to just bring, oh, I've got both layers selected, that's why. It's the top layer. I can change the opacity on that to bring through just enough of the detail that I actually want on the image. So that would give me something like that. I can do it that way. The other way to do it is to use a mask. So if I put a mask on here, click on the right button, I take a paintbrush and make it a large paintbrush. Ooh, not that large. Make it reasonably soft. Put the flow down there. I could now, if I'm painting black, get this the right way around in, I can start to just paint in a little bit of that detail, if not all of it, through there by any means. Over here, I'm going to take that flow down even further. I'm just going to try and bring back the detail in the trees that I want from the HDR image. And just bring a little bit more of that in and just lighten bits of the water. Right, I'm just going to make a little larger on there. So I've got something along those lines, which has kept the slightly more natural sky on there. So that would be one way of dealing with it. Just put a little bit more in on there and around there. Oh, and I've just spotted something else that still needs a little bit more of a crop to do like that. So that would be the sort of final image, which I think hopefully balances a lot of the things from the different parts. So I now exit that, save it, and close Photoshop. So now we should have the PSD here. So I go full screen with that. That was the slightly oversaturated one, slightly more naturalistic. That's the HDR. And then ooh, that was the original and then mine, which brought out some of that extra detail in there. So it's a combining of the techniques together. Now, I need to get one of my windows back up so I can see what on earth is going on, because it's the one I had to close. Right, yes, and that's what's going on. Right, so that's that. So that's what I would recommend for that. And I've gone way over time, so I've got to get through the remaining bits of this. Oh, I've been told it's Bodiam Castle, not Leeds Castle. It's very similar to Leeds Castle, is all I will say on that. Right, okay, so moving along, because yeah, we've looked at that. Dealing with the unexpected failures. Not all shoots will go to plan. Sometimes they go horribly wrong in unexpected ways. How do we deal with it? Well, how do we deal with that immediate panic and loss of confidence that it gives us? We're there in the middle of a shoot, something's going wrong. Oh hell, how do I do this? What do I do with it? And I know some of you, like me, have come across that and have had to face up to that kind of thing. So let's go through some of the techniques that will help you with it. First thing to say is just be aware that blips and brain fade happens to all of us. It doesn't matter how often you've done something. There will be a time where your mind will just go blank and you think, I don't know what I'm doing here. I can't think what I'm meant to do next. And if you're there with a client or someone you're photographing, or you're going against the clock, or you're doing this, you're working with a model, it's so easy to feel pressurized when you've got a model there that you're paying, that you need to deliver. You actually don't. You're paying them. They're getting paid. Yes, it's great to produce great images for them, but a model who is being paid has no expectation of actually getting any images at the end of it. So just accept that these things can happen, and don't put the pressure on yourself, because it happens to everyone. It's not just you. It's happened to me. It happens to the photographers that you admire. Not one of them will tell you they've never had a brain fade or a blip whilst they're doing a job on there. So what do you do when that momentary lapse happens? The best thing to do is just take a short pause. Just take a breather and think about it. Take a few deep, slow breaths. By doing that, it calms you down. And that really does work. People who suffer from anxiety are told the best way to deal with it is breathing techniques. And I recommend that sort of technique. So it's as a hold. Now, you obviously don't have to do the hand movement, so you can just do that quietly. Take those few breaths, and that will just calm you down to think about what's going on. And if necessary, do something mundane for a few moments. Let me tell you of something that I do. And I have done this at weddings when I've been the photographer. If I get a point where I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing now, and it does happen, you get that blip, and I just need that 30 seconds. What do? I get my light meter out. I press a button to switch it on. I press a button to make it active. I go and walk over to the subject, and I'll hold it near them, and I'll point it at the light or at the camera. I'll press the button, and I'll look at it, and I'll slowly walk back to my camera, and I'll check my settings on the camera, match the ones on the Lightroom, on the light meter. Even though I'm pretty sure that they probably did to start with, and I had absolutely no need to do that. But I've done that because it's just bought me 30 seconds to breathe, to think, and and to work out what I'm going to do next. And that 30 seconds was spent doing something. So the people who are watching me are going, wow, he's taking a light reading. He must know what he's doing. If I just sort of stopped there and gone for 30 seconds, whilst it suddenly came back to me, they'd have thought, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. So find something mundane to do. It might be you've got lights set up. Just take a moment, just go around, check all the settings are right, check everything's working on it. I mean, I know these sort of techniques as an actor. If you get brain fade on stage and there isn't anyone to prompt you, what do? Well, we put a move in. You walk somewhere and walk back again, make it deliberate rather than just standing there. And that really does help, just doing those sort of mundane tasks. Another thing to do to try and deal with the unexpected failure is to prepare for it. And I call this doing a mental risk assessment. And this is before you go to the shoot or whatever it is that could go wrong, is you just start thinking through what could go wrong beforehand. And you think, well, okay, the battery might run out of power. So I need to make sure I've got spare batteries with me. The camera might fail. I need to make sure I've got the spare camera with me. Or I might not be able to do that complex lighting setup with 3 lights because it might be too windy. Well, okay, I'll have this lighting setup as an idea at the back of my mind. So you've thought through a number of possibilities. Had a shoot recently doing the funeral director one. I showed some of the images from last week, and I packed an umbrella light. Had no intention of modifier, no intention of using it. Just happened to have it in the bag because I thought, well, maybe, you never know. Lighting stand went over, and my softbox was destroyed. So from that point on, I just got. Looked at the client, said, it's okay, I've got this, and just carried on. But I thought through that. If something happens to that, I've got that. And that really makes it less likely that if something goes wrong, you're not going to panic about it because you've already got the ideas up there. You have a plan. You have your plan B. Now, it doesn't have to be written down. It's the fact that you've thought through a lot of these, even if the exact scenario wasn't one you thought through, the fact that you prepared others puts you in a position that you're less likely to panic and have that problem when something goes wrong. The next thing, if something does go wrong, what do? The best thing to do is just to go back to something that's more familiar to you. Maybe it's the lighting setup was a harder one to work with. Maybe it's one where you're having to, I use the term ride the aperture because any slight movement with your subject means you have to change your aperture or change your lighting. Maybe it's one where it's very precise in another way, and it's a complex lighting setup and you're struggling with it and you're starting to panic. Well, okay, go to something simpler. And then add something in after that and move forward in small steps. I mean, I do this with lighting anyway. I always try to think, have I got a 1 light setup that I can use? And this is a really good little technique. You can always go to a 1 light setup, 1 light, softbox or umbrella or whatever on your subject. Then take a shot, look at it. Okay, it's not as good as I want. What do I need to do? I need to put another light in. And you build your lighting up. And that, for me, is a go back to something familiar technique. If ever I've got a problem on a shoot, I go back to that technique and that works me through it. I mean, I'll do it at other times anyway, particularly when I'm teaching. So just because you see me do that doesn't mean I don't know what I've had a failure somewhere and I'm covering it up. It's not that. But if I do have a failure, that's something I will fall back on. a step at a time approach, and just move things on one step at a time, gradually, until you get the desired result on there. And also, if you do have that unexpected failure, make sure you do your debrief afterwards. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? How do I make sure it won't happen again? What should I have done differently to prevent that? Was it that I was lacking in preparation? The example I gave earlier about the flat batteries at a wedding, what should I have done? I should have done all my camera checks the day before. I should have cleaned my camera well in advance on that. So that's how I can prevent it happening again. So go through that process. All right, okay, that's dealing with the unexpected failure. Now, I'm way over time, really sorry, folks. But member photo of the week this week is, I've chosen this one from Gary Platt, partly because it's Doctor Who night, and therefore something to do with time is an obvious thing for me, but I also like it. I really do like it. And that's how it's going to appear on as part of the banner, the Facebook banner this week on there. So congratulations, Gary. Thank you for that one. I'll change the cover image as soon as the live stream's over. We've still got one more section to go on here, so don't disappear just yet. And that's basically false failure. Two different types. One is imposter syndrome, and that's people who genuinely feel they're operating at a level they're not and they're failing or worried about failing. And there's false modesty, those who are always saying they're rubbish at something and aren't. Let's deal with those. Imposter syndrome. I've got a complete blog about it on my website. Go to the photographers section of my website and put imposter in the search panel and go and have a read of it. It's all about feeling you're not qualified to do the job. I get this all the time when I'm on board ship giving lectures. I know that the other lecturers, the majority of them are qualified lecturers, have had years of doing that sort of thing, and here's me, just a photographer who is self-taught, talking and telling people about how to do photography. I'm not qualified for that job, am I? And I am, because if I'm objective about it, I wouldn't keep getting hired if I wasn't good at it. And people tell me how much they enjoy my talks on there. Get that third party feedback that people tell you, an honest approach on there. Don't let imposter syndrome get the better of you. We all feel it. And there are photographers, some of you are on this live stream who I know suffer from that. You think you're no good at something and you actually are. You're really good. I said this to, I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning it. Bernard, who's watching the show tonight, I was doing a one-to-one with him, and the way he directs models is really, really good. And it was only his third time working with models, and yet he can feel, oh, I'm not sure about that, but get the feedback, get someone you trust to say. And he was picking up on posing on things that I hadn't seen. He's got a natural ability on there. And sometimes we just need that reassurance from friends to tell us we're good at it and not to let the concerns get to us. Okay, false modesty. Sometimes this can be a genuine lack of confidence. And I know there are people who suffer from that, but it can also be people who just are fishing for compliments. If you're in the latter, stop it. It's not good, it's not clever, it doesn't help you, it doesn't help anybody else. If you are genuinely lacking in confidence and you think your work isn't up to the standard it should be, then just be objective about it. Put your images against others and you'll see that actually your work is good on there. As I said before, get trusted people to give you feedback. Maybe the question when you post an image is you should post something like, I'm not sure about this. Is it up to standard? And if so, tell me what works. And ask people about that, and you'll soon know. You'll get that confidence back, because that's what you might need on there. But if you're attention seeking, then just stop it. Next Sunday, I finally got to the end, and I'm sorry it's much longer than I'd intended on this. Next Sunday, I'm running another half marathon in the morning. I will have a live stream. I'm going to pre-record some bits of it. I'm going to do a beginner's guide to Affinity Photo. I know people have been asking for this, so during the week I'm going to record some bits of that. But I will be live. I will be doing feedback as normal, but I'll probably pre-record all the Affinity stuff for it. So that will be next Sunday evening. As ever, put your images up for feedback on the Facebook group. On there, email them to me at feedback@ians-studio.co.uk. And until then, I'll say sorry for overrunning. Keep making great photos. See you next time. Bye for now.